we have with us today Akshay Pathak, who is the head of Swiss Arts Council Pro Helvetia, and Lydia Mischkulnig, who is an author from Austria who writes about this exact topic. And I will actually leave it to Lydia to describe her work and how this fits into the context. Akshay and Lydia, over to you.
Thank you very much for the introduction and for the invitation. I'm glad to be here. Well, yes, I thought about the topic of biased free language. And as you know, the German is the language in which I write and it's also my everyday life language. And it is the literarian language. So as this is a gendered language, you are concerned by these questions as soon as you realize that you are a woman writer. And what is a woman writer? A woman writer is somebody who is a female of one's own concept, and maybe is concerned by topics that come up from the present environment, which is surrounding you, and is your focus as a female writer set on female subjects or on female circumstances or on female situations in everyday life? Is it focused on a political level? Is it focused on a social political level? Or is it something that gives only an idea of inner projections you have? And what does this make with your dealing with the language on paper? And then after that, you come up with the question, and how is the audience receiving this, what you have written on paper? Who is the audience? Who is the critic society? And in the German-speaking world, there has been recently a study on gender relation in the literature marketing sphere and in the newspaper sphere. And this was interesting to read that more than 3/3 of the whole publications in the German-speaking world which are reviewed by men and written by men writers. And this was very interesting because I had always the feeling that the representation of the women writers in our bestseller lists or in our lists of writers, all in common, is almost equal. But it's equal between the sexes, but it is not. And this is a bit awkward, I must say. I haven't realized that days before and have just read this today in the morning in the newspaper. And so this is something which triggers me in a certain way and throws me back into feelings when I realized that there is kind of bias in our language, and we are not even aware of this fact. And when I was a child and I went to grammar school, to a lycée in the south of Austria, there was an Afro-American girl in my classroom. She was the only one with a dark skin. And we met each other privately as well after school, and we went to a coffee house. And when we were at the coffee house, I ordered from the waiter, it is a dessert, a cake, and it is called Moor im Hemd, which means human being or man with dark skin in a white skirt. And it was, it's a totally racist name and description for a simple dessert that never argues about. But in this moment, I realized that this is an insight, that it has to have a history. Where does this name for a pastry comes up? And what is this making with my friend? And her name was Rosa. And I asked her, and she answered in a very fantastic way, because she said, oh, it's not a problem for me. I will order a white girl in a puff pastry. So this was a contradiction, and we could talk a lot about the racism in the German language, which you don't even realize when you use it, and you are so used to it. And this made me very attentive, and that makes me, I think it enhances the awareness of how to work with words, how to work with the construction of words, and how to what to express by composing sentences to each other, and to come to a literarian text. Okay, that's what I can tell you right now on the spot.
Okay, thanks a lot, Lydia. Nice to see you again.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely true for almost all languages. I would say that they have they carry with them a lot of biases. It kind of makes me question whose language is it anyway, to phrase the show. But I think one of the things I was thinking about while preparing for this, we also had a chat some time back, that sometimes I wonder, there's also this standardization of a top-down language, right? You have these um, um, languages people speak and very standardized, like the Hochdeutsch you have in German. And sometimes I wonder, is there a difference between how people refer to themselves? Because um, it's often in reference to the other that these things become problematic, or they start having biases. So when you describe somebody who's not either part of a community, or if you're a man and you're describing a woman, or if you're setting the standards of a language, as I said, the standardization of language is quite key. And I wanted to ask you also about that, that it's how does that vary? Like, I sometimes feel that the language my grandmother spoke, which was a certain kind of Punjabi, it also full of all sorts of biases that society anyways has. But at the same time, it kind of was, for me, it had certain references and idioms which were not which were absent in, say, let's say, Hindi. And do you face that? Do you feel that too? Like, are there, because there are Germans, there's not one German.
Yeah, you're definitely right. You know, in Austria, there are several dialects, as well as you can find it in Germany or in Switzerland. And everywhere is a special connotation in the semantic field of expressions. And this differs from each other. It makes it, for me, it made a difference to write in the so-called Hochdeutsch, in the standardized version of German, because this kind of language, this idiom is like an artificial language to me. It is as if I had to translate from my inner voice, or from the voices of my memory I have in my head. And when I want them to literalize that, because I'm telling about a story that plays at the border to Slovenia or to Italy, and this is a very special place, then I have to remember these, and then I have to find out what was the real meaning of that, what people said, and had to translate it to a language which is, let's say, bearable for today in this Hochdeutsch version, because of course there are expressions and there are meanings and phrases. These are full of biases, and it would be misunderstandable to use it again, because the impact of that was a different one. People didn't know so much, or let's say they weren't so aware, or they were not so scholared, or they were not educated enough to know about the differences, and had no experience about thinking about that. And even the communication among the people, it was not such a sophisticated one, and it was not really used one, because they didn't discuss with each other. This was not the level. That was not the social class. This was countryside, and there were farmers and middle class people. And but there was not the university where the place for discussion is open and where people can meet, or other places. So this was really in the on the countryside where I grew up, and it was a lot of silence there, I must say, among the people, and a lot of history-laden past. And guilt-laden past among a lot of people, because there were people aligned previously to the Nazis and others that were not. And so that also made the languages of the people different from each other, and it they wanted to exclude themselves from each other. And the narratives they produced fought against each other, and due to the democratic possibilities, it was possible to fight for the correct historical narrative, and so that it couldn't be taken over by the wrong side on historical facts.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, that I would relate something similar. You know, I was doing some research as part of my writing as well, and I found that interestingly, when the British were ruling India, they used to conduct the census. So in the late 19th century, one of the census commissioners goes from house to house, and this is in the northwest frontier province, which is now Pakistan and a bit of Indian Punjab. And they would have people who would refer to everybody else. When they would ask what's so and so's caste, they would say he's a Shudra, which is kind of a very broad category of a lower caste. But it was funny that everybody was referring to the other as the Shudra. And the standardization of the language was going on at the same time, which was defining people in very strong ways, where the language suddenly, like the example you gave us about the dessert, there's lots of references to lower caste professions, etc. But I think that also went hand in hand with the standardization of language, where things were defined. So who has the power to define? And I think in that context, I also will bring up what Lasya mentioned, and I'd also discussed that when we spoke earlier. This irreverence, the what I learned was the punching up and punching down, is that how sometimes people also use that biased word to kind of punch back. I mean, the one of the examples that comes to mind is America in the 80s, when it takes the word queer and kind of, adopts it instead of it being an abuse, kind of pushes back. I look at it slightly critically, because they then export it to the rest of the world, and we also have to define ourselves like that. But at least in that context, I found that the biased word or biased language can also be used to fight back. You don't always have to sanitize it. And I was wondering if you have anything to share in terms of you as a writer, or just from the German language, where you feel, well, there was something which is very, very problematic, but it can be used in a way that it also kind of maybe dissolves the meaning or punches back, as they say, punches up. So
Well, I think the word gay, which is in German schwul, has made such a development. The appreciation of this word gay has totally turned, and it has been turned around. I remember in my childhood, this was a word that was kind of pejorative, and it was defining somebody as sexually extra special, and this was not connotated with a charming meaning. It was kind of aggressive and weird, and it can be somebody who is threatening for you as well. So be aware and take care and so on. And I think during the 70s and the 80s, the gay people took the term for themselves, and they transformed it into someone which is full of pride, and which is used by themselves because they have taken the power to give the meaning to this word. And this is maybe that what you meant. It depends who is the user and who gives the meaning to the words, and who is coining the grade of appreciation of the semantic impact. I guess this is something that is very interesting, and I think this process maybe is also observable with the term woman or female, or even girl, because in German it is neutrally gendered. Yeah, it's the little
das Mädchen,
woman, das Mädchen, das Fräulein. Yeah, not die Frau, but das Fräulein. So, and I guess due to the fact that the awareness of biased language is enhanced, this will also open the minds for doing some change, as I hope. I'm not sure how this is, how, let's say, equality is representable in a gendered language. I don't know. There are attempts to do that and to stress the point, to claim for the power, and to come up with special endings. So when you say the teachers of a group, and there are 99 women teachers, and there is one male teacher, then in German you make the plural for teacher is die Lehrer. So it is the male version of it. It is the generic masculine. Yeah? And they try now, so there is an attempt to come to equalizing terms, so that you find a suffix that turns it into a combination of men and women. Well, this looks practicable, but in fact, it is disturbing the flow of the reading and the flow of the writing as well. So in literary fields, I haven't seen it so far, unless it is a special style element for a story, for example.
Interesting. I have one more question, or rather a point of discussion, then we'll move to the audience. We also have this contention, like whatever, this situation where writers are also writing or depicting truth, because I sometimes feel that invisibilizing a certain kind of oppression, by saying that there is no race or there's no caste, so we'll make a sanitized race-free language, can also be counterproductive in some ways. And then the other side is the freedom of expression, that if you are talking about a certain context, if you are talking about the desert story, how else do you do it? Or do you think, these two things, I was wondering, it's more a thought for me, that I find sometimes that this very politically correct way sometimes invisibilizes what is there, which needs to be addressed, because by not seeing the elephant in the room, it doesn't go away. And the other is that you also, as writers or as artists, people have to sort of depict, let's say, a certain reality. How does one do that with the biases in place? Because language, as we agreed, is quite biased.
Mm, mm, mm. If I got you right, I would answer this way. Especially by shaping a character that is, let's say, the main protagonist of a story. And well, why not a racist? To write a story about racism, and inventing a racist, how do you depict this person? What kind of language is this person using? Which verbs, which nouns, which attitude is given to that expressions? Because this comes up through the used language and the language you use for shaping, let's say, a racist, maybe an Austrian racist here, sitting in a coffee house and ordering a more im Hemd, for example. It could also be depicted as somebody who is extra politically correct, So it is a nuance that gives you the correct wording, and in literary dimensions, and it depends how let's say, how simple or how complicated this person as a character is in itself. And is that one aware that racism is not politically correct anymore? Is he aware, or she? This would change the behavior of somebody you would like to depict in a story about that, which is a critical one, maybe to reveal what is going on in somebody who is using this language and not even realizing what the talk is showing about the real subtext, which is shaping mind and perspective and the word that is surrounding the reader, Yeah, I guess we, as an artist, you have to know a lot how you can even treat biases in a fruitful way for a wonderful story. To come up,
and not to pretend it doesn't exist.
To come up with the appeal of a non-biased language, for example.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, it's thanks a lot. I mean, it's supposed to be an interactive session, so we're halfway through, and I'd like that we open it to any ideas of or words or phrases that the audience can also bring to this discussion. Okay. I personally have always found the concept of respect in languages quite funny. So I think, I mean, in German, the idea of Sie and Du is not probably so much about respect. It's more like formal and informal. But like, say, in Hindi, it's very rude to call someone Tu if it's an older person or your boss or somebody in kind of a higher social class. And I have always found that to be, so I bring that as my contribution to the thing. How do we tackle this? I mean, there are languages which do not have that, I'm sure. Let's hear from. Yeah, I think I mean, please do, but I also would request Lasya to maybe join, because they will.
Yeah, sure. Of course.
But this was I was just throwing it out there as my contribution to how do we address the bias.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lydia and Akshay. Now, that was a wonderful discussion. And I would actually now request the audience members to use the chat box and send to all panelists and attendees what or you could also raise your hand if you'd like to speak, and we'll try to get your point across. Tell us about, from the discussion that Akshay and Lydia had, it would be great if you could actually start telling us about what your experiences with your own languages has been like, and do you see anything that's changing within your languages, or the way literature is being written in your languages, etc. I can see that there are people from so many different places here. Some people from the German embassy, are from the Goethe Institute, from the Austrian embassy. A lot of people who I know can speak several different languages are around here. So, and also Indian languages, we really encourage that as well. So please start telling us what you think about your own languages, and how do you think, or if something that has been spoken about here has helped you start questioning things that you have accepted as default up until now. We actually have one comment by Sushanta De that has already come in, where Sushanta says, it is important how words are pronounced as well. I think if I have to paraphrase a little bit from what's coming from Sushanta, they say that it's important about how words are pronounced as well. Otherwise, it gets confusing to understand who it is addressing, who the word is addressing. That's also a good point. I would like to know if Akshay or Lydia can you relate to anything within the languages you know?
When I was in Japan, I heard about that there is no gender in the language, but it is a gendered language, because women speak in a different way than men do, and this is related to the voice. So it is said that speaking voices of women in Japan, they speak in a 350 hertz range, and this is much higher than that of women compared to other mother tongues. This is interesting, and this is an example which is very explicit. Maybe it contributes. Of course, it is. It depends. Of course, there are also words in German, they can change the meaning if you emphasize it in a different way. But I have no example right now on the spot. I'm sorry, but I know that they exist, and but it's not so important, I guess.
The pitch and tone being varied.
Yeah.
It's very. I mean, for me, I think it's quite obvious that at least in India, which is actually not just India, I found it also in Germany, that certain ways of pronouncing are class markers as well. You know how you speak the language places you in society. So even not just words. I mean, even in English language, you know, I think when the one of the princes, I can't remember their names, married a commoner, and the discussion was that she's gonna say a napkin, not a serviette, or something like that. It was words used by classes also vary, but also how they are said. You know, in Urdu, the lehza, like, you know, if you say rivaz, you're very kind of sophisticated. If you rivaj, you are a person from the village. So it's kind of also pronunciations can be, according to me, also biased latent.
Yeah, and
so this is about like the shibboleth, like the shibboleth in the Hebrew mythology, where the pronunciation of a word talks about your origin, and that makes you accountable to a group, and this is also exclusive or inclusive.
Yeah, that sounds very interesting, and I think it's so interesting that I think earlier on in the discussion also, both of you spoke about dialects, and I think Akshay has also now mentioned how class decides language and vice versa. It's so interesting that I was actually going to take that conversation one step forward and speak about how that sometimes also feeds into political movements, right? For instance, like something as recent as in India itself, there are so many Indian languages, and people for instance, a particular state, the states are divided based on languages, right? Like they're all reorganized, like officially. So in like the last state that got divided based on language is against Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, and it's so important to notice that people in Telangana were always considered less educated and more crass, and they speak what is considered by the other Telugu speaking people, that they speak the more crass language, the more irreverent, more abuse ridden kind of language, right? And it sounds for some reason more masculine, or the way they say it. So it's just very interesting that I'm so glad that you mentioned that, and that somehow just like became a political movement, and I think one ate into the other, and it's just something else now. And on that note, and the way we speak and the dialects, there's somebody called Urja Raje in the audience who's spoken about um, you know officially how we speak. I think if I have to paraphrase the question, the kind of question that came, um, do you both have any inputs on speaking about, yes, okay, I have spoken this particular language throughout my life growing up, while this is the language, these are the bunch of languages I spoke, and this is how I was people around me spoke these particular languages, so I imbibed them. There is a stage where, with the changing dialogue in society about more inclusion, we're also being far more careful. For instance, more colloquially, when I'm addressing you, I would say, hey guys, let's do this. But right now I'm trying to say you both, right? Like I'm trying that very, and this is, things like that have to be very, you have to do it on purpose before it becomes very natural, right? Somebody talks about official settings, right? So how do you notice that when you are in a more professional setting, do you try to be more inclusive with your language usage, or have you seen that in people around you?
Maybe you are more cautious because there is a controller around you, somebody who judges your sentences, your performance. And as a writer, I know when I go on stage with a text, the text is checked. Because I don't want to be obnoxious to the readers and to the listeners, to bore them with unharnished and unvarnished sentences. I just want to come up with the best what I can give, and that is why I know there is this knowledge about. There is a control, there is a kind of a supervisor in you, because it is out of you. And this, I think I have internalized such a position, I guess. But this is also my aspiration to it's the same, I guess. So I want to reach something, and I want to come up to terms with something. And this attempt is also not only an attempt, it is also a training of my skills, and it goes deeper. So it is an interrelation, and but what I have to be encouraged to try it, and not to be confined by an inner censorship or a censor who is outside. This has to be completely nothing important to me. Otherwise, I couldn't invent pieces of art language. Or language art.
Yeah, I think for me, I would say what I said at the beginning of the interaction with the audience, that I think I find this usage of respect very problematic. I mean, we still have words like Your Honor, His Excellency, and Sir and Ma'am, and you and Aap and Tum, and it's a little bit. I think those are official or contextual requirements. I mean, who wants to call somebody Your Honor? I mean, it's forced. I mean, or His Excellency or things like that. But it's forced. I'm sorry, I'm speaking in a very open place here. I have
Great.
job I have job requirements where I'm also expected to do it sometimes. But I think that those are also biased in a kind of in some strange way. They're biased towards respect, as
Yeah.
if
Oh, yeah.
and talking about just a quick comment on the dialects thing we were saying. I think German is kind of the by far I found. I mean, I learned it for years, and then I used to always joke with my German friends that you called your standard language High German. I mean, it is called High German.
Yeah.
Like the rest of it is low.
Right,
like
right.
it's low.
Right. And this is really expresses so much about the hierarchy within the German languages, So there was the high German. We always called it High German, and I think in the 80s we changed it to Standard German or standardized German. So which is equalizing everything, Yeah, I can understand this very well. This argument of respect. Thank you.
There is another question.
Yes.
A very good point, actually.
You got it right. You want to take that from there? The English.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very good point, especially in the context of India, where it says a huge amount of fund goes towards reducing mother tongue influence in India, especially in corporate call center settings. I think even in education institutions. Yeah. What do you think about it? While it helps you stand out in the industry vis-a-vis other countries, but what impact does it have on the languages? I think it's a very, very good question. It's a very important problem. Because first of all, I don't think that it necessarily makes you stand out. That's a myth. I mean, you could be I was listening to a big industrialist. I shall not name him. He's kind of all over the news, and he's giving an interview to someone with the most broken English possible. And it doesn't affect his social position. If you belong to a certain caste, you can speak English very badly and be lauded for it. You can be Kangana Ranaut and kind of say people are making fun of my English, but it doesn't affect so I think this myth that, suddenly a language gives you social mobility. Yes, there is a historical kind of understanding of how it has helped, but overall, I think it has killed mother tongues. And I think one of the most important points here is the fact that kids drop out of school because they are not taught in their mother tongue in India. And and I think, but sticking to our point about the bias, I think it is the bias that a certain mother tongue is lowly. There are high and low caste languages in India as well. Everything is hierarchical. So I think the bias as a language itself, the entire language being, the North Indians referring to South Indian languages as some, I mean, in Bombay, the term would be Undu Gundu or something like that. It's an entire kind of, it's not just racist, it's kind of clubbing the entire language in a certain way. And I think that a bias-free dictionary would first involve also to kind of a proud dictionary of your own. So to answer that question, I think it affects very badly, and I support all linguistic movements which kind of punch back.
Yeah. It's so interesting that when people say that to me, they call me a Madrasi, they don't know which language I speak. So I tell them that before you get a dictionary, you should probably get a map because you don't seem to know which language is spoken where and how many different places are there. It's the next thing actually is, I think also the previous question kind of feeds in and borrows from this is I believe English also changes a lot with region. We know as well as there exists no standard form of English, but the pronunciation and style varies a lot. Before we actually directly answer that question, I actually want to contextualize the previous point that you were discussing, Akshay, about the fact that English is given so much precedence, and maybe even Hindi in a country like India, is a colonial hangover, right? At least with respect to English. Hindi is an altogether different conversation, which I don't think this session will accommodate. But if we speak English, it's a colonial hangover, which maybe countries that have not been colonized by the British are not so hung up about, oh, we need to be speaking great English. So it's just now that English itself is changing, like Arpit says in the Q&A box, how do you perceive what's the right English? Who's speaking the right? I mean, okay, yeah, the British, but who really owns that language at the end of the day? What is your opinion? And also the bigger question about just trying to appropriate the whole world into speaking that language, right? What is your individual opinion on this, Akshay and Lydia?
Well, I think if the media have the precedence of using English, then they are the conqueror of English, I guess. And as far as I see here in Middle Europe, the younger people are very good at English because they are in the internet, they have their influences on diverse channels, and they are used to speak in English. And I guess it is a very it is a submitted English, let's say, and it is not the English of a normal life as you can have it in London or in the United States somewhere else, or in India, for example. It is different, but I guess it is the lingua franca of the world. And who possesses it, I don't know. I have no idea, because I think when I look to the Indian market of literature, such a lot of people write there in English. And so English is the language, and nobody has the right to say this is my language. Language is it is a good of the universe, and as far as we can, we should use it in all our ways we can to express our minds and to find cope, to find ways to cope with each other betterly.
Yeah, I mean, I'm finding it interesting that actually we were expecting people to talk about words in their languages, etc. I think the interesting conflict that has emerged is within languages, and within languages of the same kind as well. So like German, etc. I think so. I think it is interesting that the contradictions of language are first and foremost vis-a-vis other languages. You're denied your mother tongue, etc. And seems to be like even one of the points here, very good point. Books written in native languages are not usually perceived well in English books. What is your opinion? You know, it's very interesting. You say the word perceived, because actually they don't sell so much. You know, Lydia, you'll be amused that actually the sales of English language books in India are much less than languages in the mother tongue. So if you go to Kerala or if you go to Tamil Nadu, they'll sell many more books, have many more readers, but it's the perception, because it's called hegemony, right? The media is, English media is dominating. It's again a class thing that, oh, these are more intellectual people. So it's a perception issue, not necessarily that they are read more or things like that. And I think this I find quite interesting that we are still waiting. I was waiting to hear some phrases or words from people from their languages, or a language they probably learned. Like for me, I still stand by my problem with respect. Why do we have Your Honor, sir, ma'am, and things like that. Why do we still have that? Because I can't just blame it on colonial hangovers. I mean, we also. So I'm just trying to steer it back a little bit
Yeah.
to that.
I was actually we'd actually want people to contribute with some words, but I was also going to point out there was this one session that we were doing about disability a while ago in regional languages, regional language literature and disability, and somebody told us something very interesting in that about how people who are disabled in India are called Viklang, right? And the usage of that word itself is so problematic because Viklang has been used in a negative connotation for the longest time, and it still continues to be used that way. That something is. But that this person is diseased, so it's just or that they have a bad nature. That's literally what it translates to, and it's something that's been coined a century ago, and people still continue to use it colloquially. So it would be great if our audience, we have a few minutes left, and rightfully let's divert back to the original conversation.
Lasya, if I may say, the point that you raised, I mean, I was reading this book recently called Their Plant Eyes by
Yeah.
M. Leona Godin. I don't know if you know about this book.
No,
It's an
no.
excellent book. It's written, she's visually impaired. And she says that there are two extremes to exist for a blind person. One is that the entire language say you are blinded, by faith, you're this and that. And the other is that you're special, you're Homer, you're kind of, you're so, that Viklang and Divyang kind of
Yeah.
contradiction. So either you're super blessed, you have vision, you
Yeah.
have extraordinary vision. So it's kind of somewhere still trying to be human in between. And it's a very good book to talk about how to use language.
How to use language.
It
Yeah.
fell on deaf ears and whatever,
Yeah.
and I think the words around disability, I think almost all
Yeah.
languages, they are very, very, very deeply
Yeah.
problematic.
And Muda says there is this whole discourse around the usage of the word specially abled.
Exactly.
It's just and so if you speak to people who are activists, they speak about how when people try to sugarcoat it and not use the word disabled. I love that you also Lydia spoke earlier about the usage of the word gay, right? Like a few years ago, a couple of decades ago, people used it as a joke to insult the other. Now people use it for different reasons, right? And even the word Dalit in the Indian context was probably used for regressive reasons, and now it's become a word to protest. So I think it's also great that people have taken words from languages that have been historically used in a way to oppress, and have started using them to actually revolutionized the entire context itself. Like I was sharing in the dry run session about the whole Coca-Cola campaign in Brazil, right? So I find those pretty interesting. And can you think about anything like that?
Who?
There are a few. Yeah, sure. Go for it.
Yeah, I think German also has languages around like words around blind is used very casually, right?
Yeah, blind is
blind faith, all sorts of things. And
the blindness is something which is also which is represented in mythology as well, because there is the symbol, the analogy for justice, the Justitia. She is a statue, and in the one hand she carries a scale, and or in both, I don't know exactly, and her eyes are blinded, so she cannot see, to enhance her feeling for justice. And this is why this motive of blindness is motivated in the, let's say, specially abled way. Also in the Greek mythology, the blindness is an important motive for people who can see much more wider than people with normal eyes, let's say, with common eyes, usual eyes, because they can see into the future and they know more about the past. So, yeah, in a way, it is shapeable in this or that way.
Thank you so much, Lydia. Akshay, I think we will have to wrap up this panel because
Sure.
Nilanjana and Urmi have kind of tried to join in already. But would love to take any last parting comments from the both of you about what would you, if there is something else. I know we expected that people would give us more words, but if there's something that you're taking away from this and something you think that people who have attended this session today can ponder upon.
It was very interesting. Of course, as I said, I wasn't surprised that the contradiction emerged to be between languages than within language, because I think when we talk about multiple languages, the struggle becomes something else, not just do I speak a politically incorrect word, but I would still be curious if people can continue discussing, if it makes us think about some words that we use so casually. And I would encourage everybody to challenge the idea of respect and not base it on just words. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for doing this, Akshay. Lydia?
Okay, yeah, I want to say thank you for the invitation. It was very interesting discussion for me with Akshay. I think what I learned from this conversation is, or what has become more aware than before, is that I think that the arts really can shape the terms and can take them over and can transform the meaning of them. And this shows us that we are shaping the word, and that it is a question of respect, but it has to be a respect from one to the other on an equalized level, and not in a hierarchical scale.
All right. Thank you so much, Lydia and Akshay, for joining us today and for doing this. Thanks to the people at Austrian Embassy and to everyone at ProHealth New Delhi, Swiss Arts Council ProHealth, for joining us. And I would actually like to inform the audience that at 5 p.m. tomorrow on track 2, there will be Lydia's Chai Pakoda Reading Adda session where Lydia will be reading out from their work, and it will be followed by an audience interaction round. It will be moderated by Trisha Niyogi of Niyogi Press, Niyogi Books. You can catch Lydia there again. Thanks, Akshay. Thanks, Lydia. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Nice talking to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for attending. Thank you.
Thank you.